Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Sagar Joshi and very warm greetings from Law Prep Tutorial. So yesterday we talked about Rajiv Gandhi's assassination case, and also as it was the 30th anniversary of that event and the power to pardon and remit. So February 6th is the video that you all should watch, the in-depth analysis there that I have done about the constitutional provisions involved in that regard. So make sure that you watch that, and that has been added in the description box of the video also. Now, as promised, that today I will start off with the discussions around the Israel-Palestine dispute. What is the history involved? So I am going to do a little bit of history about it today so that you get a brief idea of what is happening now. And tomorrow we'll carry on with this discussion because I know this past will take a little bit of time. समझने में थोड़ा समय लगेगा. You'll have to get accustomed to the situation there, ground effect. So there will be doubts, so that I'll be able to take those doubts and carry forward the discussion. So, and focus it primarily from CLAT perspective. Now, moving on with doubts. A lot of you keep having doubts related to or putting in questions which are about news that are happening around the world but not directly related to CLAT. अब जैसे कि एक न्यूज़ है कि बिटकॉइन का प्राइस has fallen down considerably in the past couple of weeks. अब see, in CLAT you will not be asked कि what is the price of Bitcoin. Okay, that is not something that you need to be bothered about. The only thing that you need to know about that issue there is that, see, the supply of the currency is far more than the demand for it. Suddenly the demand of the currency fell and therefore the price of it. अगर मान लो कि आज all of us viewers and Indians in large decide to not use Indian rupee altogether, where like हम कोई और currency use करेंगे, हम Indian rupee इस्तेमाल करना बंद कर देंगे या हम इसके नोट्स को बैंक में वापस कर देंगे, आप नोटिस करेंगे, you'll see that the price of Indian rupee in international markets will fall. So currency, the confidence and their prices are dependent upon couple of things: consumer confidence, then the demand of the currency, then third is the international acceptance of that currency. Now Bitcoin ka demand has fallen considerably, the confidence of people in cryptocurrencies in general has fallen down, and therefore the price of Bitcoin fell. So that is something that is there. It isn't important from news perspective of CLAT examination, and therefore we skip it. Okay, so make sure that anything that is not relevant, avoid getting into conversation. Now what is important from there is what is cryptocurrency, something we have talked about, that it's a technology based on blockchain. All right, so moving on with newspaper analysis. On the front page there is a big news. What is this about? The Supreme Court delivered a judgment yesterday which states personal guarantors liable for corporate debt. So whenever there is a company, how do you understand this? Whenever there is a company, let's say ABC company was doing a business for supplying sports equipment to the IPL. The IPL got suspended. So this person who had taken a lot of loans because he was supposed to supply a lot of equipments has not been able to do it. He will not be able to pay back because the equipments are no more required. So what happens is, now he goes bankrupt. He had taken debt. He had invested the money in production of bats, balls, equipments, and now there is no demand. So the products are lying. He has a lot of debt. Now the banks or the creditors who had taken debt want the money back. They realize that the company has no money to pay back. Now what happens is, IBC or the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a law that you invoke to liquidate the assets of a company to recover debt. For example, he has equipments that can create bats, grip for bats, leather balls, all of that. So those equipments are there, but you can sell it. Now to sell that is a plan that you make under IBC. अब उसके बाद भी लेट्स से कि पूरा का पूरा पैसा नहीं हो पाता, इवन आफ्टर यू सेल ऑफ ऑल द एसेट्स ऑफ द पर्सन, you are not able to recover your debt. Your debt is still there. So what the Supreme Court judgment now means that whenever you take a bank loan, there are certain people who give guarantee. As per this new judgment, now the creditors या जिनसे पैसा लिया है, they can go and sue those guarantors and recover the money from them. So this is a judgment that the industry. So abhi for example, Vijay Mallya or Nirav Modi, right? So they took loans from multiple banks. Their companies have been sold off. The debt is still there. Now those personal guarantors can also be sued to recover this debt. This is the new shift that this judgment will bring in. Now everyone will take a note key, and these personal creditors will also, guarantors will also take a note key. You cannot fund those kinds of business projects which are not viable for the sake of it, because you're like, or guarantees will not float around in the market कि चलो मेरा friend है guarantee दे देते, मेरा क्या जा रहा है. So those kinds of things will not happen. This is what this judgment means. All right. So now what kind of questions can it be related to CLAT examination? So now you can be asked a question related to IBC in your legal section in contractual affair or contract law के अंदर. So the question directly can be, can a personal guarantor be liable for debt of a company? The answer is yes. Under what law can personal guarantors be liable for debt? IBC. All right. So this is the kind of questions that you can be asked. Application based question भी हो सकता है. You can be asked, if this person is a personal guarantor, will he be liable to pay back? If he is a personal guarantor, then the answer will be yes. If he is not, then no. And remember, this guarantee only applies when a company's debt still stands after the liquidation process is complete. तो मान लो कि लोन लिक्विडेशन 1000 करोड़ का लोन था, प्रॉपर्टी बेचने से you recovered 98 crore. So the liability of the personal guarantor is only of 2 crore rupees now. Okay, so those kinds of scenarios is what this matters. Okay, any doubts that you have related to this, feel free to put it in the comment section. Then apart from this, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the CDC head and the chief medical advisor to US President, gave an interview to the Hindu and called that, see, vaccination is the only way to go ahead. All right, on the right hand side, so after asking the central government to quash GST on oxygen concentrators, the Delhi High Court said it had had enough. It nudged the central government to do it, but has now ordered quashing of GST on oxygen concentrator. That, see, this is a life-saving drug. It cannot be taxed in the same manner as normal times, and therefore the steps the government takes in these regards has now to change. So the GST on oxygen concentrators has been quashed. Under that, this constitutes a life-saving drug. Apart from this, Israel and Hamas reached truce after 11 days of fighting. So we'll be talking about this on the international page. Don't worry about that. That is one important news for us. On a sad news, on a person in news related. So this once again puts environment in light. That noted environmentalist Sundarlal Bahuguna from Uttarakhand has passed away yesterday because of COVID-19 related complications at AIIMS Rishikesh. He was a pioneer Gandhian freedom fighter who led the Chipko movement. Apart from this, he had also participated in different movements for environment, against rising alcoholism in the state of Uttarakhand, and lived the life of a pure Gandhian, as the followers of Gandhi usually do, live a simple life, not indulge in materialistic pleasures, and took steps wherever, however he could point out the environmental. And he was the first one in India to talk about how ecology and economy go hand in hand. That for sake of economic growth, you cannot put the ecology of a place in risk, and that's Himalayas need to be saved. In this regard, this is an important event for India. A noted environmentalist has now passed away. He had a huge influence on our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and how she was the first head of state of India to talk about climate change and the risk that it related to 10 years before the first Earth Summit also. So in that regard, his influence on her to talk about environmentalism and environmental conservation as an important aspect of way of life. The risk of climate change is real, something that we are seeing right now. We yesterday only discussed how A76 became the largest iceberg to break away from Antarctica. So all of those are risk of the climate change itself. Then moving on the national news. So on 26 January, part of the events related to the tractor march in Delhi were also events of violence at the Red Fort. In that regard, charge sheet has been filed, but no charges of sedition have been made out against Deep Sandhu or those other 15 as investigated by the SIT. Sedition as an offense is something that is a lot in vogue. Anything that you do can be seditious or anti-national nowadays, but in this regard, the investigative agency has not filed sedition charges against the individuals who indulged in violence at Red Fort. So now the trial will go on in this regard. However, no sedition charge has been made out here. Then moving on, another noted person passed away, that is Dinesh Mohan, a IIT Delhi professor. He was an expert on traffic management. So he also passed away yesterday. Apart from this, on the national news, nothing of real note for us. One more highlight here is Samyukt Kisan Morcha writes to Prime Minister to resume talks. So while the farm laws remain suspended by the Supreme Court, the agitation of the farmers on the borders of Delhi remains unabated even during the pandemic. In this regard, they have written a letter to the Prime Minister asking that talks should resume and their demands should be fulfilled, and otherwise they will intensify their agitation. So that is something that the government needs to see. So we move on to the editorial front. On the editorial front, the main editorial trumping majoritarianism in the Hindi heartland. This is political article related to how parties can plan elections that are due in Uttar Pradesh next year. Uttar Pradesh is crucial for anyone who wants to retain power in the country because it is the state with the highest number of Lok Sabha constituencies. So it becomes an important state. The Bharatiya Janata Party has been in power in Uttar Pradesh in the past 4 years and will be facing elections on this level next year, early February. On the left hand side, extending safety. Now this is related to the new guidelines that the government has brought in about delaying the second dose for the Covishield vaccine. Covishield vaccine is the adenovirus vaccine manufactured by Serum Institute. It is the vaccine that has been administered up to 90% of the people who have got the first shot or the second dose of the vaccine. In this regard, government has now delayed the time period for second dose. So earlier started out with 4 weeks, became 8 weeks. Now it is being stated as 12 to 16 weeks. Already in United Kingdom, there were reports of delaying the second dose up to 12 weeks. Why do we do that? It is part of higher immune response of the body against COVID-19. So this is something that was called in by the government. However, what is being criticized is the lack of scientific conditions that the government has given on response to this. This is a shifting goalpost that the government has been doing based on vaccine availability at large and not on scientific risk. So this is something the government needs to do. However, vaccination remains the only mechanism to do anything against COVID-19. Then fitful approach. India must have data protection laws. Something that I talked about yesterday only, that India does not have data protection or privacy laws against companies at large. The only event, WhatsApp is a big app, that is why it has been highlighted, and the government has huge stakes in people using the app. However, privacy as a concern is existent in every sphere of life. So there are two questions that the government needs to answer. The first is, why has the Indian government dragged its feet over not passing a data protection law in the first place? Something that was set the standard in place for every app developer in the country. So Europe already has a GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulations, something that prevents WhatsApp from having a privacy policy like the one they want to implement in India in Europe. So this is the first thing. The second question for the Indian government is that in its affidavit, WhatsApp highlighted that there are big companies such as Google, Big Basket, Koo, and other public apps such as IRCTC, Bheem, Arogya Setu who have similar privacy policies. So WhatsApp cannot be signaled out in this regard. This is the slippery slope argument where see, others are doing it, so why will I not do it? Therefore, the government needs to put in forefront in its foot and put its foot down and say that see, privacy is important of all individuals and we are there to protect it for everyone. So that is something in long term. Right to privacy is part of fundamental rights under Article 21. So any issue related to that is important for all of us. Okay. The case of Justice Puttaswamy versus Union of India is the one that is important for all of you. Privacy in virtual sphere is now one of the most important aspects of individual life. So this is an issue that cannot be ignored. So we will keep a track of what is happening right now. Then on the right hand side, the aid fight offers COVID vaccine patent pathway. So this editorial talks about how during the AIDS pandemic during the 1990s and early 2000s, similar waiver was granted by WTO. This waiver was effective to reduce the price of drugs for AIDS from 200 to 500 per person to up to $49 per person. So this happened because of this waiver. This is the same waiver that is being sought by India and South Africa now for COVID-19 related things. Two things that stand out from this article is, first, compulsory licenses. What are compulsory licenses? Under compulsory licenses, the government orders the company that is making vaccines to give license to other companies to also manufacture it. This is different from voluntary licenses. Voluntary licenses are where the pharmaceutical company on its own will enters into agreement with other pharmaceutical companies to manufacture. So first is consent. In compulsory license, government orders. In voluntary licenses, companies get it done on their own. The second difference is compulsory licenses does not come with technology transfer. That let's say the government orders Serum Institute to let ABC company manufacture Covishield vaccine. Serum Institute under a compulsory license is not required to give technology transfer. That how to manufacture the vaccine, that technology is not required to be given to ABC company. If let's say Serum Institute enters into a voluntary license with ABC company, then it will on its own will provide the technology transfer. So to manufacture COVID vaccines, you will need technology. How else will you know what is to be put into the vaccine to manufacture it? This is the difference that is being highlighted by individuals who do not support the waiver on COVID-19. But it is being seen that this technology transfer should also become a necessary component of the waiver. That needs to be seen what is done. The second alternative is the COVAX initiative. India is a member of the COVAX initiative. That what is the purpose? What is the aim of these licenses? That more vaccines will be available to people who cannot pay for it. How do you do this? So either you make the price of these commodities cheaper so that people can buy it in poor nations, or rich can manufacture it, rich will pay for it, and through a mechanism it will be distributed to poor countries for free. So while the company that is manufacturing it will retain its profits, the poor countries will still receive the vaccine. The purpose is that poor should get the vaccine. That will still happen. But COVAX initiative is still now underperformed, and based on the best of estimates, only by 2022-2023 will poor countries be able to get access to these vaccines. Therefore, it is being called that COVAX initiatives budget should be raised and more production needs to be ramped up so that poor will get access to vaccines. Then moving on the other national news. So this is the ground story about bodies being found on the banks of the Ganga river. You can see the horror of thousands of dead bodies around the river banks, of no counting, no name, no nothing. It's just the sight of it is horrendous to see. Then moving on, one news is about a USS era destroyer, that is INS Rajput, was decommissioned yesterday. Decommissioning is the process under which a ship that becomes old has to then be scrapped away or is out of service, slowly taken out of service. So that is INS Rajput, a destroyer from USSR in Indian Army services for 41 years, has now been decommissioned. Then more obituary on Bahugana's life and how his efforts were part of environmentalism. Then our External Affairs Minister will be traveling to United States to get more vaccines for people. The Supreme Court has stayed an order of the Allahabad High Court. In this order, one of the famous remarks by the Allahabad High Court was that the healthcare services in Uttar Pradesh are Ram Bharose, that is at God's mercy. The government was not doing anything related to address the concerning of the people. Now in this regard, the Supreme Court has stated because the government claimed that the order that was passed to ramp up healthcare facilities, something the government is unable to do at such a short notice. Now that is what, even if you cannot do it at a short notice, the order in itself highlights that a lot needs to be done, and that is something that whether it is done or not, or more lives are saved or not, is to be seen. Then on the international page, it's surrounded by the news related to the ceasefire. So what has happened in Israel and West Bank? West Bank is a small strip of land, half of the size of the Union Territory of Delhi. It's a land that is at max 11 kilometers in length and stretches in width by 22 to approximate 6 kilometers at certain areas. So this area is known as Gaza Strip. This Gaza Strip is controlled effectively by a group known as Hamas. Now, we know that clashes had taken place in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, which falls in the Jerusalem city. Now, Jerusalem is divided into West and East Jerusalem. Israel controls West Jerusalem but wants a united Jerusalem as its capital. You must have also seen or read that Israel has been occupying different areas of Palestine. So now I will take you in the past. In the past, when Israel as a country did not even exist. So on your screens, on the left hand side, you can see the map of Israel-Palestine. This is the UN proposal to create two states. So you will also be hearing news that the two-state solution is the only solution for Israel-Palestine dispute. So in 1947, Israel as a country did not exist. Palestine as a country also did not exist. This stretch of land was under the control of British government. It was a colonial state just like India. So just like we got independence, similarly Israel-Palestine area also got independence from United Kingdom or Britain. Up in this regard, there are two people or two communities who populate the area. India also got partitioned, right? Majority Muslim dominated areas were created as Pakistan. Hindu majority areas were created as India. In Israel, Palestine, this was the same solution that was suggested. The area on the blue side is the area that was to be Palestine, or the country of Palestine, state of Palestine. The grey one was to be the state of Israel. This is how it was to be created. And the city of Jerusalem was to be as an independent state. However, just after this proposal was put in, a war broke out between Arab countries who supported Palestinian cause, because they did not want a separate or the land to be carved into two states. So Arabian countries such as Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Iran supported the Palestinians and claimed that, see, this should not happen. So in 1948, they fought the first Arab-Israeli war. Israel was supported by Western countries, as it is even today. This war happened and Israel won the war. When it won the war, so this was supposed to be how the country was to be divided. But by the end of the war, the areas that you see in orange are the areas that Egypt captured, that were held by Israel, and the rest of the area was where Palestinians were pushed into. So their territory shrunk in size, plus the city of Jerusalem got divided into two parts, West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem. This is the same status quo that remains today. So the international occupation that we keep hearing or reading about is those territories of Palestine that Israel occupies. Since 1948 onwards, Israel has been taking more and more territory from the Palestinian, evicting these people from this area, and this is the one that is the root cause of conflict between Israel and Palestine. Palestinians demand an independent state for themselves, something that Israel does not want them to have. Now, eventually, this is the root cause of the problem, that in 47, when India got independence, it supported the two-state solution and the UN resolution that called for this land to be divided into two states. Okay, this is in 1948 situation of the map. This is what is the status quo even today. The Gaza Strip, you can see on the left hand side, is this small stretch of land. This area is controlled by Hamas. It is landlocked by Israel, and on the left hand side by Egypt. So the people in Gaza can have no relationship with Israel. So they are landlocked. They cannot go or access the Mediterranean Sea also. So their only way around is through Egypt. And this is the Palestinian land where majority Palestinians live, but they are also being pressured into giving up their lands by Israel. It is in regard to these actions that first violence erupted. All right, so this is the original story. This is what was supposed to happen. This is what has been happening since 1948. Now tomorrow I'll discuss more related to the struggles or the intifada and how Hamas and Palestinian Authority have been created. So the area that is Gaza Strip is controlled by Hamas. The area here is known as West Bank. This area is controlled by a Palestinian Authority, a democratic government that has not held elections since 2006. So this part of the story we'll come to tomorrow. Any doubts that you have, or if you don't understand what has happened, feel free to put it in the comments section. Now, coming to the present scenario, a ceasefire has now been agreed between Hamas and Israel. This has been brokered by Egypt and assisted by United States. So Egypt mediated this ceasefire between the two parties. Hamas claims that ceasefire is conditional, that Israel will not continue with its operation of occupying the territories on Al-Aqsa and evicting people in the Sheikh Jarrah region of the West Bank. It needs to be seen, Israel claims that, see, their purpose of this conflict was to destroy the infrastructure of Hamas so that it cannot ever launch attacks into Israeli territory again. So, whether the ceasefire is sustainable, what is agreed upon, those details will come out later. Israel's aim was to destroy the infrastructure of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hamas' purpose was to tell Israel that it cannot continue subjugating the rights of the people in the Palestinian areas of West Bank and Gaza, and the two-state solution should be accepted by Israel, and it should give up control of the territory that it is occupying. Now, whether that happens or not, US President Joe Biden also said that, see, this ceasefire should begin the process or is an opportunity towards peace, that we should now move towards the two-state solution, and that is the only way to resolve the conflict as per him. So all this is about the Israel-Palestine dispute. Then there is another news that NATO will to fund Kabul airport operations. So we know that US troops and NATO forces will be going back by 9/11 this year. But the fight between Afghanistan forces and Taliban continues. So what is to be done in the meantime? In the meantime, and even after this, NATO forces will continue to train Afghan forces so that they can fight off Taliban till a ceasefire or a peaceful solution is agreed between them. So this is what the plan is. Then on the economic side, RBI is to pay 99,122 crores surplus to central government. So what is this surplus? Surplus is basically RBI's income that it gets because RBI is the banker of banks. So RBI provides loans to banks. In this regard, the interest payments that the RBI receives is part of its surplus. Some of it has paid to central government. This is not something it generally needs to be done. This surplus RBI reserves to ensure inflation and money supply in the economy. This is the income that RBI generates, not central government. But RBI is a branch, is part of Government of India. So this is basically central government saying, see, you earned a lot of money, you pay us this surplus. This is like a free money the central government is using. Why does the central government need money? Because the central government has been running huge social security schemes. It is also the revenue of central government has been falling. Why has it been falling? Because our economy is going through a slowdown. Our growth figures are falling since 2016 onwards. And while all of this is happening, the central government needs money. It is running short of money on huge levels. It is already taxing people very high on fuel. That is their source of income. It is also using this surplus because the economic growth of India is flagging. It is going slow down, and because of the second wave, it will go down further. So as growth is not happening, people will not purchase less. When people purchase less, they will pay less indirect taxes. So in this regard, the revenue of the central government will fall further. So therefore, to offset that, it has asked RBI to pay the surplus. So this is what this is about. Then on the right hand side, rules for insurance firms. Now this is because the FDI limit in insurance sector has been raised to 74%. So that is all that news has for us. Apart from this, on the economic level, nothing of real note. Then there is one news confirming that, see, the Tokyo Olympics will carry on. There is huge resentment against Tokyo Olympics because COVID cases in Japan are rising. The Summer Olympics were supposed to happen in 2020 because of the pandemic. They were postponed for a year. The situation in Tokyo has not improved. However, the IOC or the International Olympic Committee has claimed it will go ahead with the Olympics nevertheless. So that is what the news is. On that note, I'll conclude for the day in today's newspaper. Important news for all of you. First, related to RBI surplus, then the truce between Israel and Hamas. Third, TRIPS vaccine waiver. Then fourth is related to Sundarlal Bahuguna passing away. And fifth is the compulsory licensing news, the difference between compulsory licenses and voluntary licenses. And the seventh news is related to the IBC judgment of the Supreme Court. Important judgments of Supreme Court are important from CLAT examination. So that is the seventh topic that you need to be aware of. So a lot of content in today's newspaper. Any doubts that you have, feel free to put it in the comment section. So on that note, thank you so much. Please give this video a like if you like the content that we are providing you. February 6th is the video for Rajiv Gandhi's assassination case. So make sure you will watch that part, that chapter also. Thank you so much. Take care. अपना ध्यान रखिए and कल मुलाकात होगी.